Good morning, viewers and listeners of Concerned Citizens Media. Welcome back, and nice to have you here. So I always appreciate your presence, and I also encouraged by your continuous participation in commenting on my videos and liking my videos and sharing with friends and family. I really appreciate that. So thank you, and I have some news to share with you for today. First, I read some news, then I will share some video at the end. So here are the news and the Concerned Citizens Media comment for June 17, 2021. The first one is my comment on the Ethiopian refugee situations in Saudi Arabia. So I have this comment for that news. The inhumane treatment of Ethiopians in Saudi Arabia is alarming and requires urgent global attention. The Saudi Arabia government's intelligence and security forces are conducting grave human rights violations and discriminatory acts against Ethiopian refugees who entered Saudi Arabia for humanitarian protection. These Saudi security forces broke only into Ethiopian refugees' homes and vehicles and looted and destroyed their basic survival properties, confiscated their cell phones, attacked them physically, stored them in overcrowded and unsanitary prison cells. These Ethiopian refugees are also exposed to extreme heat with no food and drinking water. The Ethiopian government and the world have turned a blind eye to these serious matters and allowed the Saudi Arabia government to repeatedly violate human decency and international human rights protection laws. Please end your silence and call on Saudi Arabia authorities to stop their criminal, discriminatory, inhumane, and brutal conducts against the Ethiopian refugees. Saudi Arabia, stop these shameful acts against these vulnerable refugees for the sake of Allah immediately. You are better than this. Saudi Arabia supposed to be the land of mercy, love, and harmony for all human beings. Ethiopians and all other concerned citizens should play their parts by exposing these Saudi government's brutal and grave human rights violations to the world, and also by rushing their assistance for these refugees who are crying for help in their agonizing voice every day from Saudi Arabia. So this is my comment concerning the inhumane, very brutal activities against Ethiopian refugees by Saudi Arabian government. This is not the first time. It has been reported repeatedly, keep happening, and it's the violation after violation after violation. Everyone is silent. and I don't know why. So this silence must end. Human life is in danger, and this discriminatory act, this illegal act, this brutal act by Saudi Arabia authority must come to an end. So the global community must pay attention. Ethiopians must sound alarm everywhere. So this is a very serious situation. They are in overcrowded prison cells in extremely very tough condition, no food, no sanitation, and the heat is very bad. So really it's a very tough situation, and the abuse is also visible on social media. Is circulating on Facebook, YouTube, everywhere. They are expressing their frustration. They are calling on us to save them from this very dangerous situation. So that is the situation in Saudi Arabia, and we have to call on Saudi Arabia government, their embassies, to stop this brutal activity, this criminal act. I know it is their country, but they must respect international human law, humanitarian law. They are part of the global community. 2 Afghans abducted in Oromia, Ethiopia. So last time it's Chinese, now it's another group. Oromo Liberation Front, OLF, said that its forces have abducted 2 Afghan men working for a mining company in West Wallagga, Oromia region. The 2 men are identified as Said Hashim and Said Abu Bakr. 3 Chinese miners were abducted and safely returned to the International Red Cross Society about a month or so ago by OLF, and Concerned Citizens Media also reported on that one. Oromo Liberation Front opposes the mining activities in Oromia region, citing unfair practices by these mining companies in the region. OLF said that Oromos not fairly compensated for their resources. So Oromo Liberation Front warned foreign and Ethiopian mining companies and their employees to avoid their mining activities until Oromos are fairly compensated for their natural resources. So that is reported in Horn 24 News. That's so it's confirmed by Oromo spokesperson. So 2 Afghans now in the control of OLF in Western Wallagga, Oromia region. And I'm surprised by Afghans reaching there. I know Chinese are everywhere in Ethiopia, but Afghans, this is the first time I see Afghans in mining company in Ethiopia. Okay. Amnesty International calls on Ethiopian government to release Oromo Liberation Front chairman Mr. David Ibsa from house arrest in Addis Ababa, the Ethiopian capital city, since May 2021. He was in house arrest since May 3, 2021. The Amnesty International statement said that the Ethiopian government security forces illegally searched Mr. Daud Ibsa's house and confiscated computers, cell phones, other electronics and paper documentations, and other personal and OLF belongings. Amnesty International also strongly expressed its concerns about the well-being of Mr. Daud Ibsa due to the restriction the Ethiopian police placed at Mr. Daud Ibsa's home. Nobody is allowed to leave or to come into Mr. Dawood Ibsa's home. Amnesty International called on Ethiopian government to release Mr. Dawood Ibsa from this illegal detention immediately or file a lawsuit against him in the country's judiciary system. So I know Ethiopia constitution do not allow such kind of detention, but Abiy violated all of them. He is the judge, he is the prosecutor, he is a policeman, he is the decider. So, but Amnesty still, knowing all this, Amnesty call on Ethiopian government to release him immediately from this illegal house arrest or charge him if there is a crime. But we're gonna see if Abiy Ahmed gonna listen to Amnesty International organization or others and do something about this illegal detention of Mr. Dawood Ibsa. And you know, Abiy Ahmed did everything. You know, eliminated OLF and Oromo Federalist Congress Party. Now he is running by himself. Oromo Prosperity Party dominates in the Oromia region. So eliminated Oromos from the field. And now OPDO, or the new PP, is running by itself. So we'll see. But we called upon him to release him from this illegal detention, and the concern is nobody knows if there is food or clothing or anything coming in because of this restriction. Foreign minister of the 22-member bloc met in Qatari capital Doha on Tuesday in the latest effort by Cairo and Khartoum to reach an agreement on the filling of the Grand Ethiopian Renaissance Dam, also known as GERD. The Arab League, in its final communique on Tuesday, called on the United Nations Security Council to take the necessary measures to launch an active negotiating process aiming at reaching a deal within a specific time frame. Both Sudan and Egypt warned of dire repercussions to peace and stability in the Horn of Africa without a deal. So, Arab League with 22 member states came up with this, final communique calling on the United Nations Security Council to seriously consider taking part in the negotiation. So, Ethiopia rejected the Arab League's involvement by saying Egypt and Sudan are unnecessarily politicizing the GERD negotiation and turn it into an Arab issue. Ethiopia's statement further states the GERD is an African issue. The disagreement between Ethiopia, Egypt, and Sudan can only be resolved through good faith negotiations and a compromise in the spirit of finding African solution to African problem. That is the stand of Ethiopia. Ethiopia is refusing to widen the negotiating party. Egypt and Sudan want the involvement of United Nations Security Council. So it's a huge difference still. And Egypt and Sudan keep threatening about this dam, hydro dam, to do something if Ethiopia fails before any agreement, any binding agreement. So this is back and forth. and Concerned Citizens Media is also reported on this. And the Sudan and Egypt even repeatedly conducted military exercise. I don't know, so we will see. We will report to you. So now Ethiopia rejected the Arab League's involvement and the invitation of the United Nations. No, this is African problem. It should be resolved with African countries. So here is a huge, is a very huge difference. Okay, this is the final reading for today. No, I have one more. Sorry. Everyone's blood matter. The gay men donating blood in the United Kingdom for the first time. Gay couple Oscar and Davier say they feel proud about donating blood for the very first time in the United Kingdom. Before now, any male donor who had sex with another man in the previous 3 months could not give blood. But new rules in England, Scotland, and Wales mean that anyone who has had the same sexual partner for the 3 months or more will now be eligible to donate. So that's a huge issue. Credit BBC for this one. And here is I have just a little bit comment on this one, Concerned Citizens Media comment. To save other human beings' life, we must consider accepting blood from all human beings if their blood is healthy or free from any possible risks. Everyone's blood matters in saving lives. So whether it's gay, lesbian, or straight, we should consider taking it and using it to save others' life. So this is a change of law in England. So it was a restriction. Now that restriction is removed, and everyone's blood is welcome. Okay, the last one for reading. The volatile situation in the Middle East continues. The Israeli military struck targets in Gaza overnight Wednesday in response to incendiary balloons launched from Gaza earlier in the day. These incendiary balloons sparked multiple fires in southern Israel, according to Israeli media. So far, no casualty was reported from these Israeli attacks in Gaza. Okay, the following is Concerned Citizens Media comment. The world should work urgently towards the implementation of the two-state solution and calm down this volatile situation between Israel and the Palestinians forever. Credit CNN, except the Concerned Citizens Media. So the United Nations and others should work, start working and toward implementing the two-state solution in that area. I know Israel doesn't want that one, but they should. They already started the process. They should, urgently start implementing it, so that the Palestinians will have, at least whatever left over from Israel, and form a state. So forming two-state solution possibly will end the volatile situation, the continuation of the conflict in that area. I think maybe forever, will end it forever. So the global community should work on the two-state solution immediately. That's a comment. Thank you. That's the reading part. And let's see the videos. So I got one video on the meeting between Vladimir Putin and Joe Biden, another from the Ethiopian ambassador in the United Nations defending Ethiopia, lying again on some issues. I have a video on that one. Also one more. So let's see the meeting between Vladimir Putin and Joe Biden in Geneva. There we go.
White House correspondent covering all of that for us from Geneva. Thank you so much, Kimberly. Well, as Kimberly was mentioning, Russian President Vladimir Putin says those talks with US President Joe Biden were constructive despite many divergent positions.
There has been no hostility. On the contrary, our meeting took place in a constructive spirit. Indeed, we have varied assessments on a number of issues, but both sides expressed the intention to understand each other and seek common ground. Talks were quite constructive.
And as we were just discussing, both sides appear to have agreed for their ambassadors to return to their respective countries.
With regards to the return of our ambassadors to their workplaces, the return of the American ambassador to Moscow and our ambassador to Washington, we agreed that they would return to their duties. As for the timeline, tomorrow or the day after, that's a technicality. We agree that our foreign services will start consultations on a number of issues.
Well, let's now bring in our diplomatic editor, James Bays. He's been watching all of this from London. James, successful talks? It really feels like most things here went to plan.
Yes, I mean, I think certainly there are some things that have been agreed, and certainly if you look at the very big picture, the strategic discussions moving on from New START, the nuclear policy regarding these two major nuclear powers, clearly we should all be a little relieved that they are talking about that and potentially going to talk further on that. And certainly in terms of the tone of the talks seem to have gone well, as they were described there by Vladimir Putin. But in that news conference, you very much, I think, saw the two sides of the Russian leader. You saw the diplomat certainly talking about Joe Biden as constructive, well-balanced, seasoned politician, saying he saw his qualities and his moral values, saying that they were frank and productive talks, and the talks went and were to the point in his view. That was one side of Vladimir Putin. But of course, when he's challenged on things, and he was on human rights in Russia and the opposition in Russia, he punches back. And a very different sort of Vladimir Putin with a long, rambling answer in response to that challenge about Navalny. Notice he never says Navalny's name, the man you have mentioned, he says, in response to the question. And then comparing it with all sorts of ills, going back to Iraq and Afghanistan, right the way forward to this year, as Kimberly mentioned, to the January the 6th protests, talking about human rights in the United States and who is the killer now. And I think in some ways this is down to two different things that the Russians want out of these sorts of gatherings. Yes, most diplomats believe Russia rather liked the last 4 years. It liked the chaos in the Trump administration. It liked the disunity among the Western allies. But there's something else that Russia likes, and that's being talked to and being at the top table. It likes being a permanent member of the UN Security Council. It likes the gravitas that President Putin gets with a meeting from President Biden. So the two sides of Vladimir Putin, and I think the two objectives of Russian diplomacy, which are somewhat dissimilar.
Well, James, Putin also mentioned this glimpse of hope for mutual trust, but I noticed there haven't been any invitations to the White House or Kremlin for either man. Do we have a sense of where the discussions might go from here?
Well, I think the answer is that the diplomats will tell you the important thing is that discussions continue in some way, because you need to have a process and you need to have regular meetings. And clearly the spiral was going downwards with diplomats on both sides being expelled, and then more recently both of the ambassadors effectively leaving their capitals, and one returning to Moscow, one returning to Washington. I think if you can get the diplomats back and the ambassadors back, you can at least start a dialogue, even if they don't agree on things. But a major change in Russian-US relations, I think that's unlikely. Vladimir Putin has been in power for 2 decades, more than 2 decades, and he's not going to change. And he's certainly, despite the fact he says he saw President Biden's qualities and moral values, certainly the values of Russia and of Vladimir Putin are not what would be described as US values.
James, you've covered so many talks like these, but today we're seeing separate press conferences after these discussions, which is pretty unusual, right? Should we be reading into that?
No, I don't think so. I think, I'll be totally frank with you, I think US officials, if they talk to you privately, will say they didn't want President Biden, who is a very, very experienced statesman, who certainly knows how to deal with these things in terms of a meeting face-to-face, but they didn't want him surprised by a cunning President Putin in a news conference. He is the oldest US president, and sometimes he has the habit of misspeaking. I think they thought it was safer to have separate news conferences and not in some way be ambushed. They also, I think, have the memory of what happened, and it was in July of 2018, so nearly 3 years ago, of that press conference with Donald Trump and Vladimir Putin. And certainly that was a news conference that we all going to remember. I remember covering it in Helsinki and really not believing the words in my ear as I listened to that news conference live. Remember, on that occasion, President Trump sided with President Putin, disputing all of the US intelligence agencies that Russia had interfered in the US presidential election. I think that memory, even though it's a completely different administration, they could see the perils of a joint news conference, and that's why they went down this route of single news conferences. And we're having a little pause now before President Biden speaks to the press. I think that's probably because they're digesting some of the comments from the Russian leader, seeing how they're going to respond to some of the questions about some of the things he's said. I think the protocol department of the US have done rather well out of this, getting the second news conference. It's always best to come second and being able to respond. And also, of course, President Biden, when he arrived here, he arrived second. And I think they were worried that in the past, President Putin has turned up at some of these summits late and left the person he was meeting standing around rather awkwardly. And so the protocol department, and they're the people in all these diplomatic gatherings who make sure everything is timed and choreographed to the second. I think the US might have at least won that diplomatic battle today.
Well, everything very well choreographed indeed. Our diplomatic editor, James Bay, is there across that for us from London. Thank you so much, James. Well, let's now bring in Kurt Volker. He's the former US Special Representative for Ukraine negotiations, as well as a former ambassador to NATO. He joins us now from Bratislava. Kurt, so no breakthrough, but some success, especially given that both sides were really playing down expectations. Now, I want to ask you, as someone who's previously been involved in negotiations on Ukraine, what did you make of Putin's response when it came to that question?
Well, I think that Vladimir Putin is essentially still continuing a narrative of denial, saying that Russia is really just a facilitator or a mediator in the conflict and not really the main protagonist of the conflict. And therefore, in a position to say, yes, of course, we support peace in Ukraine, meaning that he sees it all as Ukraine's responsibility.
Well, there was also talk of the militarization of the Arctic. NATO, I imagine, will be watching all of that very closely.
Yeah, I think so, and I think Putin was actually a little bit amusing here. He was welcoming people into Russian territory, saying, well, this is all Russian. There are territorial disputes over what is Russian and what is not in the Arctic, but saying that, of course, this is an important issue and Russia has territorial areas, but we are willing to cooperate.
I was just talking to our two correspondents about the dynamic, and we know that Biden has obviously been pretty outspoken about Putin in the past, calling him a killer. That very notorious line. And as we were reminded today, he even told Putin that he didn't have a soul back in 2011. What did you make of the dynamic between the two men today?
Well, clearly President Biden wanted to strike a tone of being willing to try to work together if Putin is willing to try to work together and to de-escalate tensions and, as the Biden administration said repeatedly, try to create a more stable and predictable relationship. So the surface dynamics here are that Biden conveyed that image from the United States, and I think President Putin is trying to convey a similar air of, or tone, if you will, of yes, we are willing to work together and we want to de-escalate as well. But the substance of what Putin is saying is that he denies responsibility for what Russia is doing, puts more blame on others in the United States, and is going to continue some of the activities that he has been doing, such as the aggression against Ukraine.
Well, speaking of that, trying to shift the responsibility, I'm curious as to where you think the conversations will then go on cybersecurity, because obviously that was going to be a huge chunk of the discussions today. Where does that go from here?
Well, it was very interesting. One of the answers he gave was to say that the preponderance of cybersecurity attacks are coming from the United States, so this is really a U.S. problem. And I think what this indicates, again, is a denial of responsibility. If you know much about Russia, you know that groups don't exist and carry out activities without the Russian government tolerating it. And some of the attacks we've had against the U.S., including critical infrastructure, came from there. And Putin is clearly just deflecting that.
Okay, so that's Al Jazeera reporting on the meeting between President Joe Biden and Russian President Vladimir Putin. Okay, let's see. Okay, apologies for technical issues. Let's see. There we go.
Do you want the epic stuff? You know, the iconic stuff. You have to try it.
Yielding tonight. Madam Speaker, I rise today to call for immediate consideration of my See the Crisis Act. This legislation would prevent Vice President Kamala Harris from using taxpayer dollars to travel internationally before seeing the southern border crisis firsthand. Vice President Harris was named as the administration's point person on the illegal immigration crisis at our southern border 80 days ago, and this crisis is worsening by the day. Yet the Vice President has refused to go to the border herself and talk to the brave law enforcement officers, the men and women who are fighting this on the front lines. This out-of-sight, out-of-mind approach is a disgrace, Madam Speaker. But let's back up and look at how this crisis has developed on the Biden administration's watch. On day one of this administration, President Biden stopped construction of the border wall. Shortly after, he reinstated catch and release. Now, this turned on the green light at our border. It incentivized the historic surge of illegal immigration that we are currently experiencing in this country. Open border policies are music to the ears of the cartels, the drug smugglers, and the traffickers who make their living on human suffering. And make no mistake, business is good for cartels and drug smugglers under this administration right now. Snuck into this rule here tonight is a provision to set the spending levels for Congress. And these historic spending levels rise in nearly every category except for one: the Department of Homeland Security. And this sends a pretty clear message to the cartels that the U.S. government doesn't think it's a priority to stop them. Madam Speaker, I recently visited the border to see the crisis for myself, hear what those on the front lines are facing every day. And they told me they are completely overwhelmed. There are major vulnerabilities along our border. These are vulnerabilities that the cartels and the drug smugglers are exploiting every day. Border Patrol officers are apprehending sex offenders, gang members, even people on the terrorist watch list trying to come into our country illegally. And these are just the people that they are catching. Deadly drugs are pouring across the border in droves. Fentanyl seizures at the border have increased by 233% this year. 233%. When I was at the border, I heard from Democrat sheriffs, Republican sheriffs, about these devastating realities and the damage that is being inflicted on our communities. But apparently, even as the administration's point person on the illegal immigration crisis, hearing from those on the ground is too much to ask for the vice president. She's been the border czar for 80 days. She's been to yarn shops. She's been to bakeries. And she just flew right over the crisis at our southern border to meet with foreign countries with the taxpayer's checkbook in hand. When asked why she hasn't visited the southern border, she laughed. She laughed, and this is not a laughing matter. The border crisis impacts the safety and security of every Iowan, of every American. Every state is a border state right now. And as members of Congress, regardless of our party, it is our job to hold the administration accountable when it is failing the American people. And right now, Vice President Harris, Madam Speaker, is failing the American people. She's failing law enforcement at the border. She's failing the families who will suffer because of the drugs coming across our border and falling into the wrong hands. Vice President Harris needs to see the crisis for herself and take action. And that is exactly what my See the Crisis Act will force her to do. This bill will prevent the vice president from traveling internationally on the taxpayer's dime until she visits the southern border and reports back to the American people on how the administration will secure our border. So I urge my colleagues on both sides of the aisle tonight to join me in defeating the previous question and holding this administration accountable for the border crisis. Thank you, Madam Speaker. I yield back.
The gentlewoman yields. The gentleman from Pennsylvania Reserve.
Okay, that is the Republican strategy against the Democrat, against the Vice President Kamala Harris. Now is they have been in power maybe less than 6 months, so they start blaming Kamala Harris, even introducing this resolution to intimidate her, to threaten her, and to restrict her movement, not to visit, not to make international travel if she doesn't visit the border region. So this is now, maybe a good strategy for Republicans against Democrats, to make them look like weak on border issue. So we will see if it works for them. But I know it's asking, raising the issue in the Senate is okay, but threatening her not to travel if she doesn't visit, if she doesn't do this is like, I think it's too far. So the Republicans started early. So we will see if their strategy can be successful. But I think the Bidens are doing good so far at home and globally. So it's too early to blame them. Okay. This one, this is an Ethiopian ambassador. So you're gonna see the point of view from Ethiopian side. At least sometimes we have to hear their lies. As I said before, the Ethiopian authorities are lying very badly to Ethiopians and to the global community. They lie, no credibility at all, and they don't apologize. They just keep lying and nobody also asked them. Even you will hear the journalist at the end of his speech should ask him about Eritreans. They denied about the Eritreans' presence in Tigray region for 3 months. Then later, after international pressure, they admitted, never apologized. And that journalist missed the opportunity to ask him. And other journalists, they missed the opportunity, the golden opportunity to ask him to apologize to Ethiopians and to the global community for lying repeatedly to the United Nations and to American officials, to Ethiopians, to Europeans. They lied repeatedly. But I don't know, maybe all of us, maybe we have short memory. That's why she forgot, or other journalists forgot to ask this man, because he is representing Ethiopia. He should be asked to apologize for repeatedly lying to the global community, to Ethiopians. So let's listen to it. Again, you will hear some lies. So this is the last video.
Go ahead. Yes, it's always ready. It's like that. Good afternoon, and we participated on the informal interactive dialogue called by Ireland. There was indeed a very productive engagement with council members. We discussed about humanitarian access, and also the report that was presented by OCHA regarding famine in Ethiopia, which we vehemently disagreed with their assessment, because they utilized, a very botched approach when it comes in collecting data, because the Ethiopian government didn't agree with that. It was not done in a transparent and inclusive way. The methodology that has been deployed to collect data was completely wrong, because they used a couple of cell phones in rural Ethiopia to collect the data. So there was a difference on those points. But having said that, using humanitarian issues, but particularly famine, as and starvation, in order to exert undue pressure on Ethiopia, is completely unacceptable. Ethiopia, in the first place, doesn't believe that the matter under consideration warrants the attention of the Security Council. Nevertheless, we appreciated in closed consultation, indeed, because the spirit of the discussion was very, very helpful. So Ethiopia wishes to ascertain that the law enforcement measure that we have taken in Tigray region was indeed imposed upon us. As any sovereign nation in that kind of situation, we would definitely respond. What we did is, as any worldly government would do, we responded to the act attack perpetrated by a renegade group in the Tigray region of Ethiopia. When we say just simply a renegade group, it looks like a very small-sized army, but they trained close to 200,000 special forces and militia and attacked the Ethiopian military. That's where the law enforcement measure was taken. So the other issue that we very much appreciated, that some council members declare a substantial amount of assistance to the humanitarian effort that is being undertaken in Ethiopia. We are very much grateful to the United Kingdom, including others, and as well as China. So we hope that many other countries will also join on our effort to alleviate this challenge that we are facing. One of the issues that I have to speak at somewhere length was regarding hunger and famine, because in our history there's nothing that we are afraid of except hunger and famine. It is indeed a lived memory. We have seen grief of hunger and also the trauma of famine. So the issue of hunger and famine should not be at all politicized. So when someone labels us that we are using starvation as an instrument of weapon or war, it indeed pains us. It brings back a terrible memory of hunger. So if, as I said in the council, if we did it, of course, we will definitely carry the albatross around our neck. The guilt will be on us. But would we do it? No, we won't, because we have lived for many years through that. So labeling Ethiopia in such a manner is completely unacceptable, and it tarnishes our national values, which very much we care. And people believe that, we don't have chilliness, that coldness in our soul and heart. So that's what we told the council. So this is not an issue to the council. We are trying our level best to bring peace and stability in Tigray and other parts of Ethiopia. Thank you very much.
Mr. Ambassador, a few questions. First, your Prime Minister, Mr. Abiy, said that all Eritrean troops would leave Ethiopia, yet people on the ground still see them there. When is that going to happen? And we know from briefings here that the humanitarian community has asked for access to all areas of Tigray, and they say that they have not gotten it. When is the government going to allow access to all areas of Tigray? Thank you.
Thank you, dear. There's an unfettered access, but sometimes when there are some skirmish here and there, of course, we have established what we call it a military-civilian coordination committee, and through that mechanism, it will be cleared, and then if need be, food supply will be escorted by military. If not, the area will be cleared and will move to the destined area. So we have a very strong commitment that access is guaranteed by all means. But we see, as I said earlier, some challenges here and there. So for the good of the humanitarian workers, we don't want them to be in harm's way. It could be stopped for a couple of hours, for a day, and then of course it proceeds. So in areas where there are some pockets of resistance, and there are some limitations, but our determination and commitment is to reach out to the needy people who very much are looking for the assistance that the government is providing. Mind you, 70% of the food and non-food item is being allocated by the government itself, closing some of our major infrastructure programs in other parts of the country, closing it, allocating the fund to purchase food, non-food items, and then send it to the Tigray and also to other parts of the region as well. Secondly, regarding the Eritrean, there is a commitment from my government, and the Eritreans have made it clear as well that it is a matter of sorting out some technical and procedural issues. Our expectation is that they will definitely leave soon. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Okay, that's the last video for you I have for today, and that's the Ethiopian side view concerning the situation in Tigray. I said, you know, I don't know why the journalists all ignored the question to ask why the Ethiopian government officials are lying to Ethiopians and to the global community. Why? Nobody asked that question. That means they are allowing the government to continue its lie. Credibility is very important for the global relationship and for between government and citizens to trust each other. So I know she raised about the Eritreans and the humanitarian access. Yes, he covered it up. He say total access is, provided, and just a little bit pocket of resistance, but it's not true. It's not pocket of resistance. TPLFs are stronger. They are getting more support from Tigrayans. It's not just, as he said, pocket of resistance. The issue is beyond that. Plus, the Ethiopian government, I think maybe a month ago or so, said Eritreans start pulling out of Tigray. Now the ambassador say that's not true. They are still in technical consultation and the discussion how the Eritreans can go home. You see, this is a huge difference. But the global community, this media, the United Nations, they didn't ask. They let him go. That's not good. That's not good. When they repeatedly lie, they should be accounted for it. Didn't the Ethiopian government told us last month Eritreans start coming out from Tigray region? If that news is true, they are already gone. But that news is not true. That's his lie. Again. So I don't know how you're going to stop these people from lying if you don't make them accountable at the global stage like United Nations. Journalists, please. Journalists, please. Ethiopian journalists and global journalists, please ask them to stop lying and ask them to apologize for the past lies. Make them accountable. So how are you going to trust them? Whatever they say. That's shame on them. Really. I never seen the government lying like this. I know Trump did. Maybe they learned from Trump. Usually Ethiopians are, well known for their honesty. And lying is shame. Stealing is shame. But under Abiy Ahmed leadership, from the top to the bottom, all that shame is gone. They can say whatever they want to say. They can lie, to your face. And we have short memory. We don't ask them. We don't challenge them. The global community is also silent. The international media is also silent. So that's a tough one. And we should, if the next opportunity comes to the global media, they should ask the Ethiopian representatives. Ask them, please, to apologize. And ask them never to lie again to Ethiopians and to the global community. That's very important. Trustworthy telling the truth, communicating the truth between Ethiopians and among the global community. So they must stop lying. So I think that's enough for today. And please continue your support for Ethiopians suffering. The majority of them Oromos. Try to do something for them, speak for them, call the Saudi Arabia embassy and tell them to stop, and call the United Nations. Do whatever you can to help them, please. They are in a very dire condition, and ask the Saudi Arabia government to stop these brutal conducts and these discriminatory acts against Ethiopians. So that will be my conclusion. I will be back with other news and comment next time. Stay safe. Thank you again for sharing your time with Concerned Citizens Media. So long, everyone.